The debate. The member for Thornhill.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I'm surprised to be up so early on this particular subject, but we're debating a supply motion, and it gives all members the opportunity to talk about the exigencies of operating the province and discuss how our finances are allocated and dispersed, because the supply motion, especially for those watching us at home, is about doing exactly what the Minister of the Environment just said, allocating funds so that the province can operate. And I got to tell you, given the state of affairs with the current government, I wouldn't allocate funds to any of them. Okay, they've got a bunch of retreads over there who have no idea how to monitor fiscal responsibility in this province, and they've got some newbies who have drunk the Kool-Aid. Okay, so I think we have a bit of a problem in voting for a supply motion like that, and right now I'm thinking I'm probably not going to. And I've never failed to offer my vote for a supply motion before. But something is actually incensing me that's causing the mood that you hear me displaying today, and it has to do with a serious event that does have to do with funds that come from the provincial government, or more correctly should, and this event occurred over the weekend. I was minding my own business, actually catching up on social media on Friday evening, and saw an urgent message to me from a constituent known to me, and I'll name her because she's given me permission to do so. Her name is Laura Kirby McIntosh. She's a real activist on the autism file, and the reason is she has a 13-year-old boy by the name of Cliff who is somewhat severely autistic. Cliff has been in my office on more than one occasion. I remember him when he was a single-digit young boy, 6 or 7 years old, and he'd come in the office to talk about the autism file with his dad, another activist, Bruce. Cliff, being that he is so hyperactive due to the condition from which he suffers, would be bouncing off the walls and the ceiling. So I had first-hand information, first-hand knowledge of what Cliff was about. Cliff is also, however, a smart boy, and showed up at political meetings to ask me, in debates, for example, what the government was going to do about addressing his condition, particularly as he got older. He asked that question as any adult might ask that question. And I answered, if I am given the privilege and the honor of being part of a government that's formed, we're going to do a heck of a lot more than the government of the day. Because I'm going to tell you what happened to Cliff on Friday night. Cliff had what his mom describes as a meltdown. It's happened before. He's a great big bruising young man, and he becomes violent. Violent to the point where he attacks other people. They include his dad and his mom and anybody who happens to be in the way. I think everybody here, in a very serious vein, knows that this can happen. Cliff's particular incident on Friday occurred in the Promenade Mall in the middle of Thornhill. And it wound up resulting in the police being called, the family having to go to Humber River Regional Hospital, Cliff being restrained and drugged, and this is how we treat an autistic child in the province of Ontario. And make no mistake, a 13-year-old is a child. The health minister should be aware of this because she knows that this is a file that's been left fallow. The education minister should be aware of this because the same thing is true there. We do not allocate the funds and we do not allocate the services to deal with kids who are betwixt and between. We can deal to some extent with adult autistics, we deal with junior autistics, but a 13-year-old kid who has a meltdown in a mall winds up in a hospital in restraints. How do we countenance that? And I know that some of my colleagues on the opposite side of this House are well aware of this incident because Laura Kirby McIntosh, mom in this case, is such an activist and so devoted to her son and to that community of interest that she pushed every button that she could this weekend to get publicity on this file. If anybody was watching CTV News in Toronto over the course of the weekend, they saw Cliff. They saw the McIntosh family, and they saw what the problem is. There's a community of interest here that is very large, and the amount of money we're talking about is, in relative terms to what's going on in this province, very small. And yet when you ask, as the CTV reporter did, a government spokesman to talk about what they're doing on the autism file, they said, well, we spent another $5 million last year. It's always a spending answer. Can we ever get a results answer? Can we do something for people like Cliff? Can we do something for a 13-year-old kid who is not, like the rest of us, in control of what he does because of a condition from which he suffers? This is patently unfair. And so when I'm speaking to a supply motion and I'm talking on something like this, I'm talking about money that's in the control of the government, that if the government chooses to do what it should do by responsibility, by what it's supposed to do, by all that's right and holy, then there shouldn't be cliffs in the province of Ontario. Last time I looked, the way OHIP is structured in the province of Ontario, it can't pick and choose who it's going to deal with in terms of their health. And it can't discriminate between mental conditions and physical conditions. And if I look at the Education Act, it doesn't talk about educating normal kids. It talks about educating all kids. And I don't think that either of those acts is supporting Cliff McIntosh in the way that he has every right to expect to be supported, in the way that his family has every right to expect to be supported in their hour of need. And I got to tell you, the hour of need for that family, and many families like it, is 24/7. And that's what this government is falling down on. Now, I have a colleague who sits on my left here in the Legislative Chamber, Christine Elliott, the MPP for Whitby-Oshawa, and she's our health critic. And she is, if ever there were a dedicated and socially conscious member of this chamber, it would be my colleague from Whitby-Oshawa. And she has pushed so hard for a select committee to be struck on this very issue. And I would want to take this opportunity to urge this government right now, under the aegis of a supply motion though it may be, to take a good hard look and realize that there are people, okay, and I say this it can be partisan or nonpartisan, I don't really care how you interpret it. You're letting people down, and you can't do that. You can't call yourself a responsible government and do that. So that's my word on Cliff McIntosh, and I hope that heed will be paid. Let me take the few minutes that I have left in debate to talk a little bit about my area of responsibility, which, by the way, since it's finance, is equally concerned with supply motions and the control of the dollars allocated by government and the expenditures of the province of Ontario. This government, the McGuinty-Wynne government, as we call it, is responsible for accumulating the largest debt in Ontario's history. That is an undeniable fact. Interestingly, a couple of moments before I came into the chamber for this debate, I was interviewed by a person from our media gallery, and the question was, how does the federal budget, which I believe is out tomorrow or the next day, impact the province of Ontario if, in restraining spending, Minister Flaherty decides to cut back, for example, on transfer payments? I said, I can't speak for Minister Flaherty. I can say this, that transfer payments and equalization payments going to the province of Ontario in these days and going forward are at an unprecedented level for the very simple reason that we're now entering the 5th year of Ontario being a have-not province. And I see a smile over on the other side, but you know, again, facts are undeniable. They're sending more money than they've ever sent to Ontario. Over the course of the past 5 years, we've become the receiver, not the giver. That is an indisputable fact. And if that's the case, then my friend, the finance minister, is in a boatload of trouble. And I think, frankly, Speaker, that he is anyway. Because we have asked on this side repeatedly, what are you going to do to eliminate the deficit and bring the budget into balance, which you claim you're going to do by 2017? If indeed you're going to do that, there are only two ways of doing it. One is you have to cut something by way of expenses, and we know that there's unbridled spending over there that goes on under this new Premier as there was under the old Premier, 9.5 years now, and plenty of debt and deficit to show for it. We're at $12 billion deficit projected for this year. There's still a projection out there that nobody has denied is in force, and that's for $13 billion next year. That would be fiscal 2013-14, the budget that is going to be tabled here sometime in the next month. That leaves fiscal 14-15 and 15-16 as the two intervening years before you get to the fiscal year where you're supposed to come into balance. How do you get it down that far in that period of time? And you haven't provided any numbers showing us. So we have no confidence in your ability to do it. If you're not prepared to say, Finance Minister, where you're going to cut, or if you're going to raise taxes, which is clearly a bellwether that you put out there when you talked to the media a couple of weeks ago, we can only conclude that it's a combination of both. That being the case, Ontarians need to be informed, need to take heed, and need to understand what they've got running this province. That is a very important aspect that has to be put on the table today as we debate a supply motion that allows this government to continue business as usual. Speaker, it's anything but business as usual with this government, and for my part, I don't intend to vote for this motion. Thank you.